So good morning to you all. There's quite a few people on the line this morning. There's over 1,000 delegates that are attending this session today. We've got quite a packed agenda for you to cover in 60 minutes. It's going to be quite interesting for you. I'm hoping to put some lights on for you around the changes in law, but also to try and add in some value around the commerciality of what it is that the changes will bring and how they're going to impact your business. So we're going to take you a bit on a journey. So my name's Andy McLaughlin. I'm not a solicitor, so anything that you listen to today is not legal advice in any way, shape or form. But that being said, I am a business coach and I've spent 10 years in the world of consultancy for HR, so very, very broad spectrum of experience there. And my job today really is to give you a return on your investment of time. Now, time is the only commodity that we all have that once it's gone and once it's run out, it never comes back again. So what we want to do is, if we can, we'd like to start with a very quick poll. Now, on the call with me today, I've actually got two colleagues from HR Solutions, that's Tim and Abby. They're going to be supporting me in the background. So Tim, would you be kind enough, please, just to bring up the poll? And the purpose of the poll is to just get a feel for why you're attending the session. So as you can see there, we've got A, are you looking to make your work days easier with smart HR strategies? B, are you looking to boost profit and cut costs through better HR? Or C, are you looking to gain practical HR knowledge in today's session? So by answering this quick poll, that will enable me as the person who's delivering the information today to really sort of try and get into the specification of why you've attended. Now, as I say, we've got over 1,000 people on the call today. That's quite a big webinar that we're delivering. So hopefully you can choose a box there as to what's best for you. And then Tim's going to come on and tell me what it is that we've got, or indeed we've maybe even got a results page that we're going to show.
Yeah, I'll just give it 10 more seconds and then I'll close it and share the poll.
Thank you, Tim. That's brilliant.
All right, there we go.
Okay, now interesting. So look at that. So we've got the largest one by a country mile, as we say in North Yorkshire, is gain practical HR knowledge in today's session. So 95% of people are looking to gain knowledge. Nobody's looking to boost profit or cut costs through better HR. I'm going to come back onto that in just a second. And then A is 5% make work days easy with smart HR strategies. Okay, so into the first slide, if you will, please, Tim. Okay, so let's get into the first slide. It's the next one along. So just a bit of housekeeping for you. What you're going to need to do today, please, is listen to the webinar just through your computer or your speakers, as you probably are doing already. We'll be answering some submitted questions during the process of the call today. And if you've got trouble accessing, as I had at the start, that's okay. If you have any trouble accessing the webinar today, email through to inquiries@hrsolutions-uk.com and we'll share a copy of the recording for you. But as I say, it's important that we get this right. There's no legal advice with regards to today's call, but we can actually facilitate any advice that you need in any given area or topic after the session, most definitely. So into the next slide, please, if you would. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so here we are. This is the selection that we're looking at of the topics today. Okay, we're moving a little bit quick there. The slides seem to have, just go back again, please, Tim, if you would. Back again. The slides seem to have developed a life of their own. Right, back again. Okay, hold it there. That's wonderful. Right, so this is today's agenda. So we've got a lot to cover here. It seems to me that the broadband of the webinars may be suffering with the amount of people that are on it. So we're going to click these slides slowly, and then hopefully they'll turn more purposefully. Can sometimes happen. As I say, it's a bit of live TV. So what have we got for you today? We've got 8-9 major subjects. Now, I will stress to you that today in 60 minutes, you're probably not going to get absolutely everything that you want off this call, because we've got over 1,000 people. As we've already seen from the poll, some people are wanting other things from the session. But what I will say to you, for the 95% that are looking for HR tips, and also for the 5% that were really looking to have more HR strategies and more time. The bit that was missing in the middle was the profit and the cost size. So what I need you to think about is today that you are a leader potentially inside a business and you're spearheading the whole human resources side of your business. Well, as we can see, there's two words, there's human and there's resources. If we're going to focus on the human side, we also need to think about the resource side as well. So what we'll be talking about today from a commercial point of view is what sort of costs are businesses being hit with at the moment. So it might be that you're brand new to HR, it might be that maybe you're running a business, it could be that you are on your way to getting into a career in HR, whatever it is. Well, you could be a HR director with a very, very high up legal qualification. The whole point of this is that we're running businesses potentially. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this information is something that's palatable, that can be used inside the business while remaining compliant. Of course, that's the key thing around it, but making sure that we're doing the business some good and growing it in the right way that we possibly can. So let's slowly click the button once, Tim. Hopefully we'll just go to that first page. Here we go. Right. Okay. So we're going to discuss here one of the costs that businesses are already actually seeing on their journey of 2025, national minimum wage. Okay, so we've got some changes here from a cost point of view that are impacting businesses. And from the point of view of the business, it's not something that they can necessarily do anything about. So I'm going to look a little bit closely at what the implication is of this, and also maybe what the impact is throughout the team as well. So how is it impacting the business? Now, on to the next slide, please, if you would, Tim. Okay, so looking at the first box on the top left-hand side there, 21 years and over, what you can see is there that this wage increase is based on 37.5 hours a week. And so if we look at the 21-year-old and over, we can see that they've had a wage increment of £1,501. So a new annual salary of £23,809.50. Now, on the surface, you might think to yourself, yeah, okay, Andy, fair enough, there's been a wage increase there. When we start looking at the other wage increases, what I'm about to then talk about may resonate with you a little bit more, because if we go down to the box below on the left-hand side, so bottom left-hand side, that wage for under 18-year-olds is gone up by nearly 18%, which is a significant wage rise, a wage rise of £2,242.50 to be precise. And then across directly to apprentice on the right-hand side, again, those individuals have had nearly 18% pay rise. And then if we go up then to top right, 18 to 20-year-olds, they've had a 16.28% wage rise. So the interesting thing around this is if we were in a live session now, if we were in a live seminar and you were all sat in a room with me, I'd ask for a show of hands probably as to who's heard of something called wage compression. Now, because this is a one-way seminar, unfortunately, I'm not able to get that feedback from you. Now, a few of you at this point in time might be saying, yeah, I've heard of wage compression. A few of you might not be. So imagine this. You've got a team leader. We'll call the team leader Sarah. And Sarah's got a number of team members below her that she's responsible for managing various KPIs, maybe production levels, maybe time keeping, maybe sales. It could be a whole host of things that are in Sarah's team. Sarah obviously is answerable to the management structure for her team's productivity. And what Sarah's seeing at the moment is Sarah's seeing people inside the team getting a wage increase, whereas her wage is remaining static, as you can see. So we call that wage compression. Now, if we get time during today's session, there is another poll that we will run, and the poll talks about what would be your major commercial challenge at this moment in time. And this can be all sorts of things. And some of the things that we're seeing in businesses as a challenge at this moment in time is actually attracting and keeping the right talent. So keeping people inside the business and not having to constantly fill vacancies inside the business, that has a huge cost to the business. So we're going to look fleetingly at that and look at what that impact is, because this is where we start to weave in some of these changes from a legal point of view have a huge impact on actually what happens inside the business, including things like culture, and retention of staff. So just picking on the top left-hand side, if we go to the box, the 21 years old and over, if we look at that individual's had a £1,501 wage rise. Okay, but as we all know, unfortunately, that's not the only thing that's going up from a business point of view around wages. So again, if we were in a live session, I'd throw it out to the audience and say, can you tell me what else has gone up? And a few of you might shout back, yeah, national insurance has gone up. So if we use that 21-year-old and over as an example, while that individual has had a £1,500 increase in the wage, there is also nearly, just round figures, you can pretty much call it another £1,000 on top of that. So if you've got a pen and paper at the other end here, while you're listening to this, I just want you to write this down. If that individual who's 21 and over has had £1,500 plus £1,000 national insurance, the cost to the business is £2,500 per year for that individual. So £2,500. But if there are 10 of those individuals inside the business, that £2,500 now becomes £25,000. So interesting. We might have a business today who's on the call. They've maybe got 80 team members. Out of those 80 team members, maybe there's 10 of them in there that are qualifying for that increment. So in that case, if we've got a £25,000 cost to the business, maybe they sell a product or a service and they've only got a 10% product margin on that product or service. So to cover off that cost of £25,000, they'll need to sell £250,000 worth of additional products or services. Wow. So now all of a sudden it's not just about the actual impact of the change, it then, like a ripple effect, then ripples out from that problem. So there's the problem, the wage and increment, but now it ripples out across the business. So that's interesting. Here we have what we would call our first implicit cost. An implicit cost is something that you can't see. So we've now got an implicit cost in place that's hurting the business potentially. So we need to think about how do we get additional sales, or how do we improve our customer service, or how do we reduce down costs. So this is the first trigger point really of thinking about what that implementation of that change actually is. Next slide, please. So the things that we need to consider. We need to probably run an audit around our payroll systems, because what we don't want to do is get to the end of the 12-month period and for there to have been a couple of decimal points in the wrong place. Because as we can well assess now at this point in time, we're looking at probably some chunky costs. And the larger the business, the bigger the costs could potentially be from an impact point of view for that business. So we need to make sure that we cover that off where we possibly can. The payroll side of things, it's probable that if you are currently facilitating that out with an external provider, they've probably already got it covered off, but do make sure that you look at that. Next slide, please, Tim. So what you've got here on the slide is you've got a couple of barcodes in actual fact, or digital codes that you can copy. If you were to hold your camera up to these little barcodes here, you will be able to scan them, and it will take you through to a risk audit for HR. So it's designed really to uncover potential risks inside your business and to fortify your operations. The questionnaire is only going to take about 10-15 minutes to complete, but once you've completed that, it'll compile a nice little report for you and give you some feedback. Again, below there is an impact assessment as well. So these are just some of the freebies that HR Solutions like to put your way. We like to make sure that we add value along the way if we possibly can. Now, it's worth saying, and I will remind you of this a couple of times, you will be offered, because you've attended today's session, you will be offered actually a 30-minute free consultation with one of our experts. That can be done pretty much online. Again, just a bit of a fact find, really understanding where you're at with your processes, etc. Designed really to add some value in where we possibly can. Next slide, please, Tim. So this is a biggie. Amendments to sexual harassment protections, safer working places. Really interesting this from the point of view of when we talk about businesses that maybe hemorrhage people and they don't know why they're hemorrhaging people. A lot of this can come back to workplace banter. Now it's interesting, isn't it? What's banter for me might not be banter for somebody else. And this has opened up a bit of a can of worms really from the point of view of the responsibilities for businesses. So the first question that's on there, look, is have you conducted a risk assessment? Risk assessment for sexual harassment in the workplace is absolutely key to making sure that you're covering off your responsibilities. But more importantly than that, from your perspective, it's about making sure that you're being transparent in the way that you're running your organisation and you're doing all that's reasonably practicable with regards to assessing risk. A little bit like with health and safety. It's about talking about really about what systems have you got in place and how will you ensure that that reporting can take place. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, it's a positive duty law that we're looking at. And it is covering third parties. So think about this. Maybe you run a bar or restaurant. Maybe your bar or restaurant is open for wedding celebrations. You have a team of people come in to celebrate a wedding. As the night goes on, individuals get more and more inebriated as they enjoy the night. It might be that you have a bit of an incident in place with a team member behind the bar. He or she is maybe getting unwelcome attention, which is they are feeling that they're being harassed. That then becomes a liability for the business. But it goes further than that because there could be another member of staff who's potentially watching that as a third party, and they're actually offended by what's going on. So the question in here is how do we effectively make sure that we're protecting against something that's so broad spectrum as this? So the start point for this has always got to be the risk assessment. Then we're going to feather that down into training for the team members and making sure that everybody understands in no uncertain terms really what the structure is of what should be expected in a safer working environment for team members. Having an anti-harassment policy is great and it needs to be reviewed, but in actual fact, the policy is probably going to be a bit of a backstop for you. The front end to this is we always want to make sure that we're avoiding trouble while we possibly can. We don't want to be getting into any form of tussle with our team members, and we want to actively be a good employer. So from the point of view of making sure that we're doing staff training and ensuring that there's zero tolerance around sexual harassment in the workplace, the list is pretty exhaustive from the point of view of what you need to cover off. But again, if we turn the next page, please, if you would, Tim. So let's just think about this. So implementing regular training. If we were in a live event and I say to you, I'd ask the question to the audience, when does training stop? And you'd all shout back at me, never, Andy, it never stops. We always need to keep training in place because we need to keep reminding people of what the standards are. So creating a safe confidential reporting channel is key as well. So how are you going to do that? There are some digital applications out there that you can utilize, but making sure that staff members are free to speak up if there's a problem without the fear of harassment off the back of that complaint is clearly very, very important. Now, employers are going to benefit off the back of this. This isn't additional work for you. You should see this really as being something that's actually a good thing, because if you create and start thinking about your culture is something that really is going to attract talent into the business, and it's going to retain people in the business. Again, this is something that HR solutions are very, very keen on, and our consultants are well able to talk about how do we get that culture right. This is a conversation that lots of consultants are taking place with at the moment, because it's okay saying we're going to put these legal bits in place, the risk assessment, the training, all the rest of it, but the underlying problem is often the culture and getting inside the employees' heads and helping them to feel the importance of it. So if you'd like to find out more about that, make sure you have a conversation with one of the consultants and they can just give you a few pointers in the right direction. Next slide, please, Tim. So here you go, sexual harassment toolkit. That's a nice QR code. I called it a barcode earlier on, forgive me. Nice QR code there for you to put your camera onto and just press the yellow the yellow guidance that comes up on the screen, and it will take you through to the sexual harassment toolkit. Very, very useful. And then below, sexual harassment audit as well. So you're getting some good stuff on this. Now, there's no excuse not to do these things. Very, very important. Next slide, please, Tim. It's viewed by the government that 0 hours contracts is probably something that's exploitative. However, it's really interesting. The feedback that we're getting from businesses is in actual fact that 0 hours contracts form part of a really important toolkit that businesses are able to run, because businesses need to have flexibility. So 0 hours contracts came about way back in the 1980s when predominantly West End hotels in London, they used to retain some staff in rooms. They would sleep over for the night, and the team members would be basically on standby. So not necessarily guaranteed hours, and they could turn down the work if they wanted to. So it became an early form really of 0 hours contracts. So now, out of the 1,000 people that are on the call today, I've no doubt there will be a number of you that do utilise those 0 hours contracts. But from the point of view of how you're going to manage if they are reduced or taken away, maybe does that infringe on your flexibility to run your business? So let's have a little look at this. Turn the page, please, Tim, if you will. Okay, so what the reforms are looking at essentially is they're looking at things like reasonable notice. So that if you're going to cancel a shift, how are you doing that at this moment in time? What amount of time are you giving people? Are you actually remunerating people in some way, shape or form if you are cancelling that shift late on? Now, the interesting thing is, with regards to 0 hours contracts, it does work very well for a lot of the people that actually utilise them. It fits their personal circumstances very, very nicely. So it means that maybe they can turn down a shift if they don't want to work. Maybe they can have next week off. So what you will find is that actually a lot of these people that currently have them, they don't feel it's exploitative. But offering guaranteed hours is where this is heading to, making sure that it's more transparent in the way that it's run, making sure that there isn't any form of difficulty around the way that these are being delivered or utilised. Effectively, they're looking to give the worker really more security. Let's look at that security more. Turn the page, please, Tim, if you would. Okay, so with regards to certainty and uncertainty, there's a big conversation to be had around this really, because with regards to how we actually monitor this, one of the things that they're looking to do is to bring in a block of time, for example, like 12 weeks, where you would monitor all the way through those 12 weeks the average amount of hours that that particular worker would benefit from. And then at the end of the 12 weeks, you should be offering them a contract based on the average number of hours. Now, at the moment, this is all up in the air, so it's not actually nailed down in any way, shape or form. We will be showing you a roadmap, by the way, which gives you inclination around which years these changes will come in, so you'll be able to take a screenshot of that when that comes up. But monitoring that 12-week block and then offering that worker a contract, they don't have to accept it. And then they can opt to run for another block of time. So there's going to be a little bit more admin work in there for you. And the reforms effectively are going to offer a certain amount of uncertainty until you know what that's going to mean. But the reason that the government are looking to retract on this really is because they don't feel it gives the worker currently what it is that they need from a surety point of view. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so there's the first line there. 0 hours contracts to be replaced with the requirement to offer predictable 12 hours after 12 weeks. They don't have to accept it, but you would then need to then remeasure that over the next 12-week period. Compensation is going to be key for cancellations and making sure that flexibility can still exist through things like seasonal contracts and fixed-term roles, and overtime arrangements as well. So we're going to need to just think a little bit more broadly, because as I say, this is a potential tool that's been taken out of your managerial toolkit It's a nice bit of flexibility that seems to fit for some people, but as I say, if it's taken or withdrawn, you're going to need to start thinking about how you're going to then operate. So again, if you're unsure about this, if you've got a number of people, maybe you're a care providing company and you've got a number of people on 0 hours contracts, again, talk to one of our consultants, find out what the angle would be and how you could potentially give yourself a little bit more flexibility along the way. Next slide, please, Tim. So this session is very much like a lake that's nice and flat, and we're skimming a stone across the lake, and each bounce of the stone on the lake is a particular part of the agenda. This next part of the agenda is a big conversation. So we've only got 60 minutes today, so it's not a massive amount of time. So really what we're trying to do is just light a little bit of a fire inside your brain, think, do you know what, I need a little bit more information on that. Ending fire and rehire came about really from 2022 P&O Ferries debacle, which you may remember. So if you turn the page, please, Tim, if you will. Okay, so effectively, when the P&O Ferries decided they had about 800 workers that they wanted to sack, unfortunately, they didn't do it in a what I would call a compliant or moral way. It hit headline news, you may remember it, and then they replaced those workers very quickly. But the issue around this is, on a broader terms really, is that there are other businesses out there that have hit the wall from the point of view of struggling financially. So if you imagine, say you're a manufacturing company and you've got 5 contracts, and let's say 3 of those contracts die on you, so it leaves you with 2 contracts. Very simple maths. If your costs are that and your income is that, you've got a problem. So this is where wanting to renegotiate people's salaries or terms and conditions becomes a thing. Otherwise, as we know, we can't change somebody's contract. But in this particular instance, fire and rehire has been something that's been available to businesses. And this isn't about being difficult or being nefarious in some way. This is about wanting to have the ability to keep a business survival. Keep it in place. So employers now are going to be looking to exhaust all alternatives before terminating or rehiring on new terms. Based on a conversation in government on the 7th of July, they're looking at potentially softening this in some way, shape or form. But at the moment, because it's still up in the air, it's interesting times for us. Now, what I would say to you is, there's a lot of changes going on at the moment, and we're seeing businesses being hit by changes technologically. So with the income of AI, so take, for example, a call centre, maybe a call centre's got 200 members of staff. Unfortunately, some of those team members can now be replaced from an AI point of view. So restructuring of businesses is now becoming a thing, whereas it absolutely wasn't a thing up until that point. So as you watch this session today, if you're a business owner or a director inside a business, you might be thinking, well, fire and rehire, if they take that away, I'm not bothered because it's not going to affect us. But actually, it's something that could well affect you in the next 5, 10, 15 years, depending what happens with the technological revolution that's going on around us. So sometimes with these sessions, we need to zoom out and just look at the bigger picture. And again, this is where having a conversation with one of our consultants is sometimes good, because they're able to share pooled information from other businesses that are similar to you in your sector as to what's impacting them. Shared knowledge is always a good idea. Next slide, please, if you would. Okay, so consider the following. We need to make sure that fire and rehire is seen as a last resort where possible. You're going to need to be able to justify it. And of course, really what we're looking at is here, we're really looking at impending doom, really, from a financial point of view, is as pretty much as it needs to be. We need to make sure that we follow the ACAS mediation where we can, and look at things like a deeper negotiation. If we do involve ACAS early on, then that mediation may well gentle the impact of it. What we don't want to do is get into a fallout situation in any way, shape or form. We need to keep it relatively smooth from the point of view of the way that the whole process works. And of course, what we want to do is we want to remain out of the tribunal grip where we possibly can. We don't want to get into a situation where we're in a tribunal and we could face quite heavy action. So seeking legal advice where changes or restructuring is required is very, very beneficial to you. So again, being proactive and before a problem comes along, making sure that you're looking at that is really key. Next slide, please. If we were in a live session now, I'd ask you to put your hand up if you are currently suffering problems with sickness inside your business, because it is a big thing. It's a big thing, and it's a difficult thing for businesses to get their handle on. So with now the changes to SSP from day one now being put in place and the removal of lower earnings limit, this is going to be a biggie from the point of view of the impact on a business. Now, recent investigations showed that the average day of number of days sickness in the UK is about 4.4 per employee across the year. So if you were to look at your average number of sick days through the year, and if you're up at 7, 8, some large organisations are up at nearly 14 days sickness a year. There's some big costs in there. So the fact that this part of the law is changing has bigger ramifications than just the fact that somebody can take SSP from day one. So there's some big implications with this. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so what the government are trying to do is, again, is add in additional support for workers, helping them to feel safer around being off sick and effectively helping the family unit, really. So the waiting days of SSP are now being removed, and from day one that will be payable. Now, it's worth noting that the Federation of Small Businesses has been open to say that they think that this will be an additional cost on a business of approximately £1 billion in its first 12 months. So if you were to cast your mind back to when we were talking about putting up the minimum wage and also the increments of national insurance, and now we start looking at the costs of this. There's been no official studies done in the UK, but over in America, they've looked at what is the true cost of a day's sick. And they evaluate that around, the equivalent is anywhere between £140 to £535 a day. They talk in dollars, obviously, I've converted that. So that's the cost, because if you think about it, when a staff member doesn't come into work, that then has a ripple effect inside the business. You know, parcels don't get sent, phone calls don't get made, things don't get delivered. There's a whole breakdown in communication. So that impact is pretty big. Removing out also the lower earnings limit means that 80% of average weekly earnings or the flat rate of SSP will be paid, whichever is the lower. Now, if we go on to the next slide, please, Tim, I can elaborate on that. Okay, so just go over to the right-hand side there where we look at example 1. Average weekly earnings of £98. So 80% of £98 is £78.40, which means in that instance, that particular individual would receive the £78.40 of the SSP, which is the lower figure. And then if we go to example 2, example of earning £140 a week, again 80% of that is £112. So again, they would receive the £112, not the £118.75 flat rate. But on example 3, when we get to £150, that person at 80% of the £150, they breach it. They now have £120, so they would receive the £118.75. So again, more costs for a business, but we need to start thinking about actually what ways can we mitigate this and make sure that we don't get into a situation where this just becomes an easy thing. Because unfortunately, whether we like it or not, what we see across businesses is some people sometimes may want to just throw that day of sick in because they can. Next slide, please, if you would. Interestingly enough, just reflecting on what I just said there, SSP from day one, it's going to eliminate those waiting periods, but it means that there's additional cost in there. So when we talk about how do we mitigate that, I think your absence reporting procedure tightened up and verification procedures is absolutely critical. So, you know, talk to us about how the best way that you can do that would be and how can you implement return to work interviews to just have that visibility really around why people are off. But remember, you have a duty of care to check that people are well to come back to work. We don't want people coming back to work with anything nasty that can be spread throughout the rest of the team. So you have a duty of care to ask, are you okay? What was the reason for being off? If you're puzzled by that, then maybe this is a good time to look at your contractual arrangement that you've got with your team, because you do have a duty of care for their wellness in the workplace based on health and safety regs, but also from a commercial point of view, we need to know that people are at work, because that's how we function as an organisation, and that's where HR is a great mechanism. Next slide, please, Tim. So again, there's a HR risk audit there or an impact assessment. Just choose one of those if you wish, put your camera against it and give it a quick click. Next slide, please, Tim. Now, we are rattling through these quite quickly, but as I said to you, this is almost like a pebble skimming across a lake. We can facilitate any information that you need, any depth that you need. So next point is extending family-friendly rights. Okay, big thoughts around, again, wanting to support the family unit. Never has it been more a vulnerable person to come back to work than somebody that's just had a baby potentially. Next slide, Tim. We'll look at the inner workings of this. Okay. So what we're looking at doing here is extending redundancy protection for pregnant employees and new parents, really. It's aiming really, of course, to reduce down the D word, discrimination. Now, the D word discrimination causes everybody a great deal of concern because, A, we want to be equitable in the way that we run our organisation, and we want to attract talent. Now, one thing that I don't have a great deal of time to talk about today, but if you get all these points right, you start to become a really great place to work. And that means that you start to attract talent into the business. So if you're currently finding your recruitment process a bit chunky and a bit clunky, and you're not really attracting the right people, maybe it's time to zoom out and start looking at some of these areas and make sure that you're doing the best that you can to become that friendly culture that really is looking after people inside the workplace. So it's aiming to reduce workplace discrimination in the workplace and increase security where possible. So update your policies and make sure they're transparent in the way that they are currently reading, and make sure that you're communicating with people properly through that pregnancy process and indeed when they come back into the workplace. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so dismissal protection for 6 months is the key point there, and it's really a case of that's being extended. So employers must ensure fair redundancy and dismissal decisions and clear documentation. We can run our business as we want to run it as long as we're three things: fair, reasonable and transparent. So when we keep saying to you, have you updated your policy, it's that transparency of your policy that is your fallback procedure. Next slide, please, Tim. This is an interesting point. When we talk about how do you currently attract talent inside your business and how do you get the right people through the door, it's very often a case of what the package is inside the business. As I said in the last topic there, if you're currently struggling with attracting the right talent, maybe it's time to start look at what your potential offering is and what your culture is inside the organisation. Some of the leading brands out there across the world of business are looking to implement change in a positive way. And actually, while the government have said flexible working, 4-day working week, we're looking at making that a thing, it's not an obligation on businesses. It's certainly not mandated in any way, shape or form. But it's interesting to note that businesses that are implementing this are starting to see some really, really good benefits. So I guess the rhetorical question would be, is this something that you could implement inside your business, or is it worth maybe running a feasibility study alongside a team that works your normal hours? So effectively what businesses are doing is they're taking a 5-day working week and they're condensing it down into 4 days. So the 4 days slightly longer, and then they're taking the Friday off. So it's having some fairly meaningful impacts with some businesses, and it's not necessarily the case that your production level or your sales level falls through the floor either. So this is about trying to work in a new way. Again, the government, by making this change, are looking at increasing work-life balance. And look, let's be honest, okay? Who doesn't want to have better work-life balance? I know I certainly do. It makes us fresher, it can give us more energy, and there are benefits to it, most definitely. It's not going to work for everybody, though. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so as I say, there's no obligation at this moment in time with regards to it, but when we talk about flexible working inside a business, this is causing difficulty for businesses because people have what I sometimes call personal admin to do. You know, those people that need to go to the dentist, or they want to take the car for service, or there's always something going on. So this can always be the case that people will ask for flexible working. Now, of course, you can decline that, but you've got to have a business reason as to why you're going to decline that, and you've got to follow a due process with that and make sure that you investigate it properly and write to people. This is where maybe something like a 4-day working week could pull a lot of those requests away, because people have then got that space on a Friday. So there's an interesting spin on that potentially. Next slide, please, Tim. They are encouraging businesses to try this, and there is a growing momentum around it. Businesses that trialled it, they did a trial between, I think it's 22 and 24, 2022 and 2024, and then they looked at 60 businesses. They looked at, there was all sorts of improvements across the business, and one of the main ones actually was mental health inside the organisation. I think they saw a 67% increase in betterment of mental health issues inside a business, less stress, because life is stressful, as we know. And they actually saw retention inside the business become better. So less attrition, less people walking out the door. Now, really interesting to note that in 2014, Oxford Economics, they did a study on attrition and what does it actually cost for people to walk out the door if you have a vacancy in your business. Now, they came up with a figure of £36,000. How accurate that is, I don't know. But what we do know, of course, we all know that if we have a vacancy inside a business, it hits us on our bottom line, and some of those costs are not going to be very visible from the point of view of how do you manage management time for doing a load of interviews and sifting through CVs. How do you manage management time for training somebody? How do you manage management time for maybe if you've got to shadow somebody and that person that's doing the shadowing become less productive? So there's a whole host of things in there. So looking at different ways in which you can be more flexible inside your business will have an impact, most definitely. And again, we're looking at reducing those costs of the business if we possibly can, because when somebody walks out the door, they may not tell you the real reason why they're walking out. Maybe they're even leaving to go somewhere where they've got a 4-day working week. So again, start communicating, start thinking about what the impact of these changes would be. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so consider it for a 4-day working week without reducing wages. You could well be looking at maybe just a trial period, maybe with a specific part of the team. And really, if you're going to dip your toe in it, do a feasibility study. Make sure that you don't trip yourself up commercially in any way, shape, or form. But as the last point there says, if you're sat in interviews and you are saying to people what makes you different as an organisation, that's an interesting spin, because applicants will want to know what makes you different. So whether this will become mandated or not, we don't know. But again, be ahead of the change, zoom out and look at what the benefits could be rather than the hindering side. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, a bit like hire and refire, fire and rehire, beg your pardon. You may think to yourself, redundancy, not going to listen to this bit because in actual fact, we're not going to make anybody redundant. Well, again, from a redundancy point of view, if you've got redundancies on the go, of course, you're going to need to have legal help with that, because there are a number of pitfalls around the redundancy process. And actually, how you currently handle that is very much a reflection of your brand out in the general populace as well, because of course, as we know, if you don't handle these things in the right way, if you're not gentle in the way that you are handling that, and you're not sort of amicable in the way that you do it, it can have an impact in the way that that then ripples through the local community. So we want to get that right where we possibly can. So, you know, there's a rhetorical question here, and I don't like this question, but it's a good question to ask. Does your business ensure fair treatment of pregnant employees or new parents in redundancy situations? And now, being really honest with you, I think there are still businesses out there that do use redundancy, unfortunately, as a bit of a scapegoat, and they use it nefariously. It's only very, very small, minor percentage of businesses. And of course, this is really the change that the government are looking to stamp down on, and to, again, protect those people that are at their most vulnerable when they're potentially losing their job. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so the main change that they're looking at really is that the bill's proposing to introduce a new threshold for which collective consultation is triggered, and the maximum protective award that will be payable at tribunal is doubled from 90 over to 180 days of pay. So there is a big shift in this from the point of view of the impact, and the collective agreements, they're fiddling around with those as well, maybe reducing them from 20 down to 10. So there are changes afoot. So keep your finger well and truly on the pulse of what those changes are, but seek advice before you get into any redundancy process or situation. Any form of dismissal that goes ahead, and remember, of course, we're making roles redundant, not individuals. So that always becomes a tricky thing, particularly in times of big change around technological situations and changes. So having that clarity around that is really, really important before you actually get into that. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so the key point on there that I just want to pull out, 2 points, is update your HR policy to reflect the 6-month redundancy protections for returning parents. That's really, really important. And the other thing is train managers around that fair process. Train managers around the responsibility and also the moral impact as well. Start thinking about how will your story be heard in the local community. And doing that fairly and transparently is absolutely key to making sure that you're staying ahead of any form of impact on your brand, your culture, and of course whether you're going to attract new talent, because at some point when the veil lifts and you've made changes around redundancy, there's going to be an impact there where you're then going to need to turn to the local community and then want to employ people again. So again, it's really important to plan ahead for those restructuring. Next slide, please, Tim. Okay, so when we start talking about the employee contract versus employee handbook, this is really, really interesting, because I worked with a business probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and one of the surprising things was a great deal of small businesses still to this day don't actually have contracts of employment, would you believe? There's a fairly large percentage, I think it's sort of 14–15% of businesses. And now where I live in North Yorkshire is a good example of that. So I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm in a tiny village, and sometimes I have problems with my internet, and I'm right out in the sticks. I've got cows at the front, cows at the back. And if you were to go into our village and ask some of the small businesses if they've got contracts of employment, I think you'd be surprised. I think some of them will probably say, no, we don't bother with that stuff because we've got a load of friends working with us and we're fine. Well, of course, they're in breach. They won't know that they're in breach of the law. And just like having an MOT certificate on a car, it's massively important to ensure that you've got the right stuff in actual fact in the business. And the right stuff inside the business, we're talking about employee contract versus employee handbook as well. So the rhetorical question around this will be, firstly, is do you have them in place? And we've got 1,000 people on this call today. And there will be, trust me, there'll be 1 or 2 businesses out there that don't. So unfortunately, whether you like it or not, if you fall into a situation where you're challenged in a tribunal, automatically you'll be deemed to be unfair. Because remember, as I said to you, what we're looking at is we're looking at being fair, reasonable and transparent. If you're fair, reasonable and transparent, you have pretty much got control around the way that you can run your business. And that transparency comes from your employee contract and also your handbook as well. So next slide, please, if you would. So let's just look at some of the differences between the legal status, the purpose, content, flexibility, enforcement, and the applicability. So on that first one, legal status. So employment contract is a legally binding agreement between your employer and the employee. Okay, that's the cement between you, the business, and the employee. Okay, however, there is also then, so separate documents, so two documents, employee contract, employee handbook. So we're now moving across to the handbook. The handbook is non-binding policy document unless explicitly stated otherwise. So what's the purpose of the contract? You're really defining specific rights, duties, and conditions of employment with the contract. Whereas with the employee handbook, it's communicating workplace policies, guidelines, and expectations. So big difference there. So in effect, your employee handbook really is your rule book, it's your expectations. Now the next one down there is content, and that's so for a contract of employment, we're looking at salary, job title, responsibilities, benefits, notice periods, and termination terms. Whereas with the employment handbook, we're looking at company culture, conduct expectations, disciplinary procedures, leave policies, and HSE. Now we've not talked about health and safety today, which massive subject, health and safety. It's an absolutely huge subject, and of course it's a different law. So again, if we were in a live session, I'd shout at you, what sort of law is health and safety? And a few of you might shout back and say, I don't know. A few of you might say it's employment law. Hopefully the majority of you would all say it's criminal law, because when we breach health and safety as a company, effectively the outcome of that could be potentially quite heavy, with prison sentences and all sorts of things that can come along. So I recently worked with a company who sadly, one of their workers was in an accident. They lost some fingers in a bandsaw, and the first people to turn up were the police. So it's serious stuff. So when we reflect upon the serious nature of that, and then we look at the handbook, your employee handbook, what does it say in your employee handbook about what the duties are with regards to your employees and what they need to do? Because this isn't just about a one-way street, this is a two-way street, and they've got their own responsibilities. So I would urge you to definitely speak to one of our consultants, run past the consultant what you've got in place with regards to health and safety, because unlike HR, over on the health and safety side, it's criminal law. So I mean, employment law is bad enough. We don't want to go to tribunal and end up with a cost there, but we certainly don't want to get in hot water by not having the right stuff in place. And then there's a conversation then that tears off into what's the responsibilities from training, what's the responsibilities from PPE. There's the whole thing that needs to be covered off there. So flexibility, next section down. Contract of employment can't be changed unilaterally. It's got mutual agreement, whereas the employee handbook can be updated to reflect changes. And then enforcing the contract, of course, that could potentially mean breach of contract and lead to legal consequences, where somebody breaching an accident from the handbook, you're going to be looking potentially at dismissal or certainly disciplinary action. And then the last one there, applicability, it's individualised to each employee's role, that's the contract, whereas the handbook is going to apply to everybody across the organisation. Remember, we don't treat people differently. Next slide, please. The pitfalls around the whole thing with how you write a contract, effectively, what we see is poor communication, bad language, as in too high level, too much legal language, not enough sort of man or woman on the street language. Keep it simple, make sure there's nothing contradictory in there, and make sure that we look for inconsistencies, and make sure that we communicate it in the right way. Next slide, please. Okay, so consider revisiting your handbook. Consider thinking about what's the implication with culture. Where are you at as a brand? Where are you at as a culture? Are you attracting the right people? Actually read what you've written down and what you're telling your employees through your handbook and through your documentation. What's the story that you're telling them? Again, we can help with that. A little 30-minute chat would piece together quite nicely what others are doing in your area or your sector. And do your contracts give you flexibility to adapt? you want to make sure that they're not overly rigid, because remember, we need that flow. If some of these changes, or if all of these changes do come in with regards to fire and rehire, with regards to SSP, all those things that are coming in, it's all removing flexibility. So it's good to get ahead of these changes and start reviewing what you can continue to use and how you can continue to have that flexibility. Next slide, please. Okay, so good time to grab your iPhone or your camera phone and take a picture of this slide. So this is the Employment Rights Bill implementation roadmap, as we call it. You've got the various years in there as to where the various things are going to come out. So fire and rehire, October 2026. 2027 gender pay gap and menopause action plans. As I said to you, there's lots of things happening. Some of them we don't cover today. We've just got 60 minutes and we don't have a great deal of time for great detail on this. This is very much a first sort of step, really. Okay, you should have got a picture of that. Next slide, please. So I've already mentioned to you, you will get an opportunity to speak to one of our teams, have a 30-minute chat with them, free of any form of obligation in any way, shape or form. And it just gives you the opportunity really to dip your toe, to find out what HR solutions are about and how can they support you. It might be the case if you do business with us, you might not. The reality is we're looking to form relationships, because relationships are key to the way that we run our business, and indeed it should be the way that you run yours. And sometime at the future, who knows, you might do some business with us, but utilize everything that we're throwing at you, because it's tough in business, it's tough running a HR team. You've got a lot of responsibility that sits on your shoulders, and there's a lot of changes coming in, and so utilize some of our knowledge to make sure that you're keeping compliant. Next slide, please. So, Tim, have we got any questions that I could quickly answer in the last couple of minutes?
Yeah, so we've got 2 minutes, Andy, so we've got 2 questions for you. So the first one being, our business is struggling with huge cost increases. What can we do?
Okay, so go back to my point around the wage increments and also the increases in NIC. If you remember, I talked about having 10 people that were all an additional wage increase of £2,500. That's £25,000. Well, that's got to come from somewhere. So we need to start thinking about sickness. Are we managing sickness in the right way? Because if you remember, when people are off sick, they don't come into work, so therefore phone calls don't get answered, maybe sales don't get made, maybe a customer doesn't get the right level of service, so they cancel the business with you. There's a whole host of things that go on that we don't see. So how are we going to cut costs? We're going to be thinking more broadly about what the impact of sickness is. Can we create a better culture and retain people? Do we do exit interviews when people leave us? Do we really find out why people are going? Is it related to some banter that's going on? Start running a better ship in the way that you organise. Start thinking about people as being the main advantage inside your business, because they are your biggest cost. So those are just some tips for you. Next question.
And then recruitment of good people feels impossible. What are we missing?
Yeah, so again, going back to the part on the new sexual harassment protections, when we start thinking about that and we start linking that into what is our culture, are we an open culture? Do we provide safe working spaces for people? Do we protect our employees in the right way? Do we just work to policy, or do we go outside of that? Do we maybe put things in place like little wellness plans for our team members? I'm not talking about huge costs here. I'm just talking about different things that we can add in. And when we interview people, we're in a position where we can say what makes us different, and we can attract more talent, therefore cutting down costs. That's probably what I would say about that, Tim. So, okay, so listen, I think that's probably taken us to the end of the session. Thank you so much for attending. I'm hoping that you got what you needed from the session today. Forgive us for the jittery start. Sometimes technology can be tricky. What I would say is we've got a host of information for you. So if you've got any questions, you can contact us. You can have that 30-minute free review with us. And from there, we can add in all sorts of value for you. So thanks very much for attending, everybody. It's been brilliant. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.